Hey everyone, I'm Katie Davis, leader of the James Moore Collegiate Athletics team. Welcome to News and Brews, our To The Point video series where we discuss developments related to the coronavirus pandemic and other emerging issues in college athletics. I'm really excited to continue featuring financial voices from the industry. Joining us today is Brandi Bryant, the Associate AD for Student Athlete Services and Strategic Initiatives at Stephen F. Austin State University Athletics, which is a huge mouthful. I don't know how you do it all the time. And Patricia Moran, Senior Associate AD for Business and Finance at Virginia Tech Athletics. Hey, Brandi and Patricia. I'm so excited to see you both on video. Really disappointed we didn't get to see each other at CABMA this year. Both Brandi and Patricia serve on the executive board of CABMA, which is the business management affiliate of NACDA. And today we're going to talk about how CABMA leadership has pivoted to replace the amazing 2020 convention that they had planned originally for Las Vegas with a virtual connection this summer. Our firm always really looks forward to CABMA each year as sponsors at the convention. And this year, as we were planning some speaking options with the programming committee, I was excited when I heard about Brandi's vision for the convention programming to get back to the why of things. So Brandi, would you speak a little more about your original vision for this summer and then how that vision has changed as a result of current circumstances?
Sure. Going into this, over the last year, my roles have changed. From being a longtime CFO at my previous institution, I took on a new role that is a lot more student athlete focused. And one of the things that I think that I was at a small school, I was at Austin Peay State University, and now I'm at Stephen F. Austin, which are both FCS small, relatively small schools. You wear a whole bunch of hats. And so as the CFO, I got to do a lot of things that a lot of other CFOs don't have the opportunity to do. And so like sport oversight and getting to know the student athletes in a really hands-on approach. I think you kind of got to be in love with the grind to work at this level. But transitioning from that business side and the money aspect of things to the relationships with the student athlete side of things, my perspective somewhat changed. And I think that often in the business side of things, we forget the why. We're so caught up in the numbers and the black and the white and the profitability and the expenses and some of those things that everything that we do is student athlete centered. And they should be the focus of our everyday. So going into convention, I had our opening and closing speakers that were very much about the why and speaking to that. And then all the programming in between was very much, engaging in what we do every day. So I was sad that we're not going to get to do that, but luckily, as first VP of CABMA, you were in charge of all the programming. And then transitioning into the president, then you have to kind of be the voice. Well, luckily for me, Patricia is coming up behind me as the first VP. So she was like, girl, you've got some of it already done. So I'm just going to take some of what you got and use it for next year. So hopefully we won't lose some of that. Maybe it won't be exactly the same, but she doesn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. So some of the things that we did, opportunities we missed out on this year, we'll get to have them next year. So while it didn't quite pan out the way that we wanted to, I think that we still have a bright future of what we can do for our membership.
Yeah, no, that is great. So has anything related to your vision of why changed as a result of current circumstances?
If anything, it's really made me narrow my focus even more. I think that as this happened and we get sent home, obviously we know the importance of the business side of it, as people panic and we know that revenues are going to be down and there's going to be challenges and everybody is going to have to take cuts. As we go into the fear of what could be with football season may or may not happen, and bringing student athletes back on campus and what this fall looks like. We know the importance of the business leaders in your department, but also the focus has been, it kind of makes you feel irrelevant a little bit when you know that you can't touch a student athlete on a daily basis. Like you're reaching them virtually. So you have to change everything that you're doing. There's no longer a training table where they can come get a snack and they're at home, and you're worrying about, are they eating well? Are they taken care of? Are they doing their classwork? Are they academically supported? I mean, I think your vision it goes back to the why, because why do we do what we do every day? We do it for the student athletes. And so I think that this pandemic has actually made us more focused on our student athlete rather than less focused.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I'm hearing from CFOs all across the country, big and small, is first and foremost, it's the athletes, and then how can we best be responsible with the funds to support all of the sports and all the activities that support them.
Absolutely.
Patricia, would you share what you all have been doing to engage members in the industry virtually during this time when, engagement is really important as you're all, trying to figure out all of this uncertainty? Can you talk a little bit more about how you've been doing that?
Sure. I think one thing that we all have in common right now is we are all being impacted by COVID in some fashion. And so what I've seen through the CABMA membership, through our discussion boards, through phone calls, through Zooms, through texts, is people just reaching out, sharing ideas, thoughts, and questions. I've been involved with just the conference office and my fellow CFOs, other Power 5 CFOs as the think tank that James Moore put together. Other institutions in my state, and I know California did a similar thing where they brought, the business managers from the California schools together. And so you're seeing these offshoot of groups getting together to talk shop. And I think that's so critical right now, because a lot of us, we don't have the answers. Nobody has it figured out. So you're constantly trying to rework, rethink everything you're doing. And so I just think that has really shown the power of our CABMA membership and how giving and caring they all are. Because I think when we're also talking shop, I've received just as many calls and texts and emails of just checking in. I mean, some of my closest friends are in CABMA. And so just getting those of that little touch point of like, hey, we're not alone. You're not alone. We're going to figure this out. But are you taking time for yourself? Are you stepping away from the work? Are you, and so I think that's just as important as talking shop and figuring out. There's just still so much unknown. And every day something changes, and every school's doing everything a little bit differently. So then you're getting they're going this and they're doing this, and you've got your state regulations and your institution regulations. And so the CABMA membership and that discussion and everyone coming together to really talk and discuss, I think is so critical right now. And I've really seen that on display. So for anyone out there, you are not going through this alone. So if you feel like you are, there are opportunities for you to engage with other people.
Mm-hmm. Now that's excellent. And, I continue to be impressed every year that I attend CABMA and just see the true camaraderie and friendships that have been developed, and just how mentoring you all are of new members, and think that it's so amazing. And to me, our firm represents a lot of different industries, and you don't normally attend an industry trade show and see that kind of environment. And it's really inspiring, and other people who don't work in this industry are always shocked, because they're like, wait, you're saying these two rivals are actually friends, and they do talk shop and they share information and they don't try to keep it secret, and that's not the case with you all, and I think it's really amazing.
Our competition,
maybe the coaches, but not the CFOs. For sure. But I think the collaboration has been, when we think about, our world has forever been changed with some of the stuff that's happened. And while we can see it as maybe negatively impacted by some of the stuff that's happened, there has been some, disheartening events, kids losing seasons and seniors in high school. And, there's lots of people that have been impacted by it. But I also think that there's a really positive change that can happen from it. I know our industry is guilty of being in the office, 15, 16, 18-hour days. We've now figured out that we can still collaborate without necessarily being here. So I think it's also taught us maybe how to re-engage with our families and, and our friends, and, some of we always say that this is more than just a career, it's a lifestyle. And it absolutely is. But I think the way we work, some of the changes that we've had to make in this will forever change how we work, and often for the better, because you never know what you can do till you have to do it.
Right.
And that has been even engaging distance learning for our student athletes. Maybe hasn't always been something that's been at the forefront of what we're doing, but now we know how. how to engage, and we get better and better at it. And I think some of the things that we've adopted now will be things that we take moving forward.
Sure.
Yeah.
The power of technology that we now have.
Absolutely.
At our fingertips.
Well, and speaking of the power of technology, Brandi, what specifically do you have planned for the now virtual educational programming for CABMA?
Sure, and Patricia can speak to some of this too. I mean, the best thing that we have is our sponsorship. We have lots of great industry that we rely on to do our jobs regularly, and some of you guys, especially you guys, thank you for always looking out for CABMA and doing some of that. So there was a conversation. We helped facilitate some of the questions for, I believe it was last week. My days kind of all run together right about now with Chris and Kathleen McNeely on the NCAA kind of update and some of the things that she was doing. Patricia kind of spearheaded the questions that we're having for that. But Patricia, you want to talk about the analytics portion of what we've got coming?
Sure. So there's an offshoot group called Athletics and Analytics that approached us about some of the webinars and programming that they do. And there have been a lot of CABMA members that have attended their webinar sessions, as well as marketing and ticketing and sponsorships. And so we collaborated with them to provide a webinar for CABMA and spread that word out to the membership for part of the virtual programming. I think we are always in the numbers and the data, and we love it. And then seeing that aspect and mirroring the two of the ticket sales and the sponsorship and the external unit and how it can really apply to our internal operations. And so they've done great work and have great speakers. And so I encourage those that are really interested. This is kind of where the industry is going. And so we all need to be aware of what the technology is out there, how to use the data. And so that's going to be a great offering that's going to happen later in June.
Yeah, and I think with analytics, it's we talk a lot about telling the rest of the story, and there's so many flaws in the EADA and NCAA reporting model, and having these analytics with dashboards that it's almost like accounting for dummies. It's graphs and pictures that show you here's at a glance what you need to see and understand how things relate to each other and complete the rest of the story that's not being told. And I think that's a huge improvement in just what you're able to do with the numbers and be a lot more transparent and strategic in the process.
Absolutely. All numbers tell a story.
Yep.
We're also going to do a webinar with Packy Olin, who has been a longtime sponsor of CABMA and is NACDA as a whole, to talk about their mobile ticketing platform. I know that obviously there's some things that we're going to have to change via ticketing. The days of handing and collecting tickets will still be around, but ultimately that's going to change too. And how we think that obviously that affects the ticketing side of our jobs. It also is a cost savings. So while we think about the revenue portion of an expense portion of that, they've got a great seminar prepared to talk about some of the options that they have that will help us cost-wise as we go through our budgets and do the things that we need to reduce going into this fall. And then also we're going to do a webinar, Kevin, with WinAD. They've got some new platforms that are also some measurables, like I said, back into numbers of things that we would like to see and that they're working on right now that will help us as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. And all of that's so important and it's great that all of these vendors are able to provide timely, help you shift to what you need. And, what Packy Olin's doing is really great. If you can think of cost savings and anything to promote social distancing to get as many people engaged as you're allowed to, which we still don't know what that looks like yet. But, I think that's, really great that they're forward thinking there. And it's already had started moving that way, but, it's definitely having to accelerate significantly because of the pandemic. So Patricia, tell me more about how you're planning ahead for a post-COVID environment and from engaging membership across the industry, as well as just you individually within Virginia Tech.
Sure. So with my role in CABMA, started the prep work for us all to get together next summer in Orlando for our convention. I really hope that we're able to do so in a safe and healthy way, because I really feel like the in-person is really a true hallmark of CABMA, and I'd really love for us to, I'm going to miss seeing everyone this year in person. And so while we gear up for that and figure out what that's going to look like on how things continue to develop, continuing to foster discussions with CABMA throughout the year. I always highlight our discussion board. I think members really utilizing that platform to share ideas, thoughts, and questions is so critical. One of the things, CABMA as well as NACDA is waiving their membership fees for this upcoming year. So this is a great time for departments to really engage with their staff and say, hey, join whatever group you want and get some insight into the industry, and not necessarily just your area you work in, but understanding how the others do. So I really recommend everyone to take full advantage of that. I think that's an awesome thing that NACDA and CABMA is able to provide this year. Like we discussed, forming your own side groups of peers, like-sized institutions, geographic locations, I think is important. Having those offshoot conversations, because you all know your day-to-day better than anyone else. And so being able to have that, form those connections is so important, because we're still going to be doing this virtual collaboration for a while now. I think some of the things I'd love to see us focus on as well as we head into this year is communication styles. I think that's something we've seen with the Zoom and email fatigue. How do you communicate information among my team, to my boss's boss, to other groups? I think it's so important. Sending a 5-paragraph email is just not going to cut it. And, and you're not going to get an hour to sit down with someone and talk through things. So you really need to focus on how do you streamline your communication. Bullet points are your best friend. Like, keep it basic, especially when talking financial information, because, the eyes start to gloss over if it's a non-finance person. So, so you just need to, I think that's something that a lot of people can use some insight and really take a step back and see, how am I best communicating with the people that need to hear from me? I think it's a great time for people to really focus on your self-growth. It's tough because our days are so long and there's so much to do, and that taking a real active approach and carving out time in your day to do a webinar, watch a webinar, do a LinkedIn learning course, read part of a book that you've been wanting to read, because with this, obviously I am not in the office, and so the lines are blurred from work and life, and so if you don't carve that out for your own professional growth, it can easily get swept aside. So when we all get back to our somewhat normal routine, the skills that you've been able to develop, or that little bit of growth that you've pushed for yourself, will translate even more so once you get back to your team. So I think focusing on that, how can we provide, like we've got the virtual programming coming, and obviously this News and Brews and some of the other things that people are doing, like this is great, take part in that. And I think the biggest thing for me too is a focus for this year on leadership styles. I think we have seen the gamut, and this has been a real time of adversity that I feel like we need a better dedication towards leadership style that's more empathetic, more listening. And I think we've talked about it, but now we're seeing like that is what is needed right now. We've seen it with this COVID impact and just the emotional toll that it's taken on so many people that have been impacted, not from the work front, but also their family life and everything else under the sun. And now you see, in the last 2 weeks in this country, and the highlight of the racial injustices and the platform that we have in athletics in order to really push for this change and make it happen and be those listeners and be those empathetic leaders. And I think that's something that doesn't come easy, and it's somewhat new because I think we all have this vision of what a leader should be. And so we're kind of retooling that's not necessarily the only way you have to be. And so I'd love to see more programming and more discussion on that among CABMA, because I think it's on all of us to bring about that change, and I think it's long overdue. So those are a few things that I would love to see throughout this year, and then as we head into next convention, hopefully all together in Orlando.
Yeah.
I do hope, I'm going to jump in just real quick. I think that one of the things too is we've always offered a student membership. I just got off a call with our SAC. I'm continuing to do our SAC calls weekly via Zoom, and especially in the the cultural climate that's happening right now, so that they have an ear and they can have a say in some of this. But as they ask, we ask, what can we do? The other thing is also is provide opportunities and leadership opportunities. And so by having free membership, I've reached out to, our sports admin program and some of those people to let them know that the opportunity for that membership is free. So if you're in college and you think college athletics is an avenue that you want to take, or maybe you're an accounting major, but you think it'd be way cooler to be in college athletics than to do taxes, then maybe
for sure.
I've been there, done that, right? But there's some things that this is an opportunity that they can grow themselves too, and to step into some leadership roles and familiarize themselves with what we do on a daily basis as being part and also grow their network. The CABMA community is a place to ask questions. I think through COVID and everything else, the Black Lives Matter movement right now is that we all know that we don't have the right answers. I mean, all of us are smarter than one of us. And so the collaboration that has happened through this, I think we can also reflect on, our preparedness through this, because at some point, a pandemic is going to happen again. You know what I mean? And so you can reflect on what you did well and maybe what you didn't do well and be better moving forward. But I think that kind of happens in all facets of life. Sometimes you don't know or always know to say the right thing, but we're learning and we're all trying to be better together. And I think CABMA is definitely a diverse group and are people that are trying to get better every day too.
Mm-hmm. I love that message of being better together. And so shifting gears a little bit, want to talk with each of you about just in your own roles, both challenges that you've faced that are just really difficult to overcome, so that maybe others don't feel alone in that area, because they can say, oh, I know exactly where she's coming from there. And then also where you've seen opportunities that have come about because of this to make you grow and better coming out of this. So Patricia, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think the biggest challenge was when all this was starting to break is I'm over the finances, but I'm also over our HR department and our IT department. So those were 3 units that were immediately impacted of what are we doing? We got to get people to work remotely. How are we going to get them set up? Our finances are taking a major hit. What are we projecting? What's happening? What's going on? The human resources piece, just the fear and anxiety and the high emotional toll on individuals, and how do you navigate that? So I think getting hit with all 3 of those, I'd love to say like, yes, I got it, I handled it. It was extremely difficult, and it was extremely it was a big toll on me, I think emotionally and mentally as well. When you're self-isolated and out of the office and not having that collaboration, that team around you, it was difficult for me to really separate, like I mentioned, the work from the life, because it all blended together, and there was no clocking in at 8 and clocking out at 5. It was nonstop. There were no weekends, there were no nights. I mean, it was just a marathon. And so I really struggled to set those parameters of you need to shut it down, because I would keep the computer on when I would step away, but I'd keep the noise on. So every time I saw another, you could hear an email come through and it's like, oh, I got to go right back. Things are happening. So for those that are saying like, oh, people look what they have together, I don't think people have it together. So, you're not alone in that. I think, and that was probably the first 4 to 5 weeks. And I finally hit a point where it's like, this is not working. You need to recalibrate. Now that the initial chaos has subsided a little bit, now let's regroup, let's refocus. And like Brandi mentioned, the clarity of the focus. This is what's important right now. So I feel like I'm in a much better space in order to now really step into, we're in our last month of our fiscal year. And so, everyone who had to work from home, everyone's been set up, they've had internet and a laptop, and they've been able to do what they need to do. And so that's been fantastic. And I think the opportunities, the second part of your question of what have we seen from my unit, I have just seen a a willingness to accept the change that's happening and say, okay, I even had one coworker mention, like, I didn't realize how stuck in my ways I really have been and resistant to change until this all happened. And it was, hey, from the smallest thing of paper forms, that's like, there's no one here and there's no more paper forms. It has to be an electronic for you to do your job. So what are you going to do? And so seeing everyone come to the table and bring those ideas and move forward and say, this is what we're going to do now. And we're not going back. When we all return to the office, like, we've streamlined this process, this is how it is moving forward. And so I've seen that from my individual unit, and then from the department-wide as we talk like cost savings. It's one thing for me to come through and say, every unit, you need to take off 5% from your budget next year. But I really want to take that as, this is a department, this is a unit, let's all attack this together. And so it was every unit head, the whole department, let's all communicate and see, where can we streamline? Where can we consolidate? Where can we collaborate? I mean, one example is one collaboration between two offices in a software saved $30,000. And so does that fill the gap right now? No, but it gets us there. And as you start to add up these little things that I wouldn't know or someone else wouldn't know because they're not in your area, without those conversations, we wouldn't have any idea. And so I think bringing that awareness to the department as a whole and them understanding what we're going through and what we need to do has just really highlighted this teamwork. And I think we're going to be much better when we all kind of come back from this. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been a real nice silver lining to the chaos that we started with, to see that actual growth with people. As they say, in times of adversity, you really see how people step up. And so I've been just overwhelmed in seeing the true colors of so many people in such a positive light.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And I always say that in higher education, silos is a common 4-letter word. And that's an amazing testament to how your role as CFO to just empower everybody to get together and collaborate and brainstorm. And pennies make dollars. So every little bit helps. If everyone's willing to contribute and give, that can save and make a huge impact on something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Brandi, what about you with challenges and then also opportunities?
Sure. Challenges right in the beginning is resources. We are relatively a small institution in comparison to Patricia's Virginia Tech, but student athletes going home. That was our first thought, is when, we were on spring break but we still had kids on campus, and you had that stuff, and they're like, everybody's got to go home. And you're like, okay, but who has access to Wi-Fi? Who has a laptop? And if they don't, how do we help? You know what I mean? How do we make sure that they can still be successful academically if they're not able to be here to train and do those other things? Then you talk about institutional decisions, on refunds, and luckily we have a great president that's super supportive of athletics, and then I have a great leader in Ryan Ivey, who leans on his leadership team to brainstorm. I think we all have very different perspectives in doing some of that. So it's like some of the positive conflict that we have, ultimately we find whatever that best decision is for the department as a whole. So I think kids going home, and then also once they're home and you get through some of that, is the mental health piece. And not only the mental health piece for our student athletes, but the mental health piece, like Patricia said, of her being at home, isolated. You've got, even if you've had some challenges with some of that too, there's a stigma talking about it. But when you're isolated and you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, and maybe you're struggling already, is making sure that we were there for not only our student athletes, but our employees. And so some of that was the engaging side of things. You lose that ability to walk down the hall and say, hey, I've got a challenge, or let me tell you about what happened last night. So we increased our communication. So doing something was, we moved our admin meetings that we met twice a week, because a lot happened because this was so fluid and things could change in 24 hours. We met on Mondays and Thursdays because a ton could happen from Monday to Monday. It felt like a day was like a week in the changes that were happening. And then at some point you have to pick, starting the planning process of what happens coming back. Here, this is where we are. We got to get better doing what we're doing right now. I think our institution really took leaps and bounds on the learning side of things that will help us long term of being able to add additional off-campus online classes and some of that. So I think that will help our institution to grow as far as opportunity goes. I think that we did better in programming distance-wise. I mean, not everybody can come sit down and do a meeting. We utilized some different softwares that we had that we haven't always utilized the way that we could, whether it was in surveys so that we could get feedback quickly, apps that we have on our telephone, but even student-athlete development programs that we had, mentoring programs that maybe you would have done in person and now you have to do online. Mm-hmm. We accelerated some things that we were going to kick off this fall for communication purposes. We had planned on utilizing a software for communication for our department this fall, and we had to jump right into that way faster than expected, but our student athletes were very receptive. Our coaches did a great job supporting us in doing that, but overall, some of it's fear, and you got to work through that. Am I doing enough? Are we doing the right thing? And I just think that the constant communication of our department, but it also taught us to be really adaptable. I mean, I think we're really probably pretty good at that in athletics, but sometimes, just like what you said in your processes, this is the way we've always done it. How many times have you heard that, and how many times do you try to fight that in the CFO chair and in every other chair? So I think now was one of those things that's like, that ain't gonna work. What I mean? We're gonna have to figure out a new way. And so this kind of forced us to do it. And I feel like you kind of got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And it kind of keeps us pushing and moving forward. So while, like I said earlier, I think there's definitely a positive spin to some of this. It's going to make us better because you did have to consolidate. And, I think our coaches and their willingness to make changes, that would impact the bottom line, but not impact the student athlete experience, and ways to be. I think we had a lot of people that were willing givers, knowing that we have to make some of these cuts for us to be successful, but we also need to make it in the right places because we definitely don't ever change the student athlete experience too.
I saw recently on your Twitter that there was feedback that the athletes were giving to some changes that were happening, and it was all very positive. And it just goes to show that all the hard work you're doing is touching them every day, and for them to see that there's still progress being made has to be inspiring and enlightening, and sort of a relief to them to know that you have their backs and you're still working hard to make it the best experience possible for them, even though your resources are so limited right now.
Sure. I don't know that the word love comes out a lot in the business office. But I will say that I think it's a word that we should use more than we do right now. And I think our goal is that we want this to be the best 4 years of their life up to now. But if it's the best 4 years of their life that they ever have, then we've done a disservice to them. Their best 4 years is ahead of them. Our best years are ahead of us. And so I think that doing some of the things that we're doing, programming, preparing them for careers, preparing them for life after this, is often just as important as what we do on the daily, and their academics is a huge part of setting them up for success.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we cap off?
I mean, just to recap, we have our vote open for our third VP for all of our membership. Got some great candidates for that. And so we encourage everybody to get out and vote on those. And then you should see something later in the month on some awards that were given out, and CABMA community is always open for questions. We appreciate you so much and what you do for CABMA as well.
Well, Thank you. We appreciate you all so much as well. And, I continue to be amazed by your group, and even today's conversation. It's just inspiring to hear all of the work that you do. And it is recognized in this community, even outside of you, of how hard you're working. And that's why we're so passionate about supporting you right now. And, want to make sure you all mark your calendars for June 24th. We're going to have a double header from the James Moore side for all of CABMA membership. Kicking off, actually, I will be co-presenting one of the CABMA webinars with Garrett from UNH in New Hampshire, talking about NCAA agreed upon procedures, tips and tricks, which it's like, oh, why do I want to think about that right now? But we know you're closing your month and you might have a little bit of extra time, some of your people on your team. So if you can start focusing on that now when all heck breaks loose during football season, you may not have to think so much about that. So we're going to be presenting that. That'll be at 1 o'clock Eastern. Immediately following that, the James Moore team, government team has also put a summer CPE series together. And Brendan, who also joins me at CABMA a lot, is presenting on Excel tips and tricks, which has been a very popular topic we've presented in the past. That's going to be at 2 o'clock. So 2 back-to-back hour webinars at no cost to any of you. So make sure you check out the links. We'll have those inserted here so that you can register for that content. And, as a reminder, we just want to put out as much information as possible to help you all grow and thrive and, learn as much as you can as you're going through all of this uncertainty, which is what has inspired us to do this News and Brews segment each week. If there's any topics you'd like to see covered, please reach out to us. You can visit our website or you can email me, and we would love to hear more about what you'd like to see, or if you have something important to share, we would love for you to share that with us. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter for recent news as it's changing every day, and continue to tune in, and we wish you all the best and thank you for all your support.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so before we complete this segment, we do have the news portion done. We want to cover the brews. One thing, I decided to stick to Diet Coke today because I still have some work to get done, and I know you ladies have as well, but I do want to plug, as soon as I get home, I'm going to hit a First Magnitude brewery, which is one of our local beers. I got some Titans Haze, which is one of their New England style IPAs. So looking forward to trying that one when I get home this afternoon. How about both of you?
Yes, I'll be hitting up. I love a cider. And so we've got Bold Rock here in Virginia, and I love Bold Rock, and they've got a Virginia draft. So I'll probably be tapping that once the work day ends.
Yeah.
Well, currently I'm chugging some water, as we all should probably be doing, which is even harder when you're working from home. But I will say that Fredonia Brewery is one of our locals. Over the winter, they had this fabulous gingerbread beer that was wonderful, and I'm sure really not good for me, but it was so good. So I'm hoping maybe they got some left, but I also heard that they're brewing up a blueberry. So Nacogdoches is famous for blueberry. We have a blueberry festival. We'll see if that happens with everything that's going on right now. So hopefully I'm going to try. I try to try something new every time I go in.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. And I thank you both again for joining us today, and sad that we won't see each other in person in Vegas, but I'm excited we can still see each other video, and looking forward to Orlando next summer. So thank you again, and hope you have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.